From the heart of Wrexham, welcome to the Hope Street Church podcast. For more information of how to get involved, stay tuned until the end of the episode.
Welcome everyone that is joining. This is surprising that people would want to tune in to listen to a conversation between me. It must be on account of you, I think, Kyle, to be honest.
Andy, come on.
How's your day been?
Okay, yeah, I've been working, and then children at the end of the day. But yeah, it's good. I'm seeing some names that I recognise, which is nice. So welcome everyone. It's good to be here. And yeah, how's your day, Andy?
Yeah, good. It's been good. We had some guests here over the weekend, so just been we had a great time for that, and it's just been a day of kind of regathering ourselves today. Getting things, get a few meetings and different stuff, and excited for this conversation. Why don't we begin with a little introduction? So I'm Andy. For those that don't know me, myself and my wife Rachel, we lead the church at Hope Street. And then Kyle, you have been part of Hope Street from the beginning. You guys moved up here to be part of the story right from the start. You've been so key part of the story, and you by profession are a clinical psychologist, aren't you?
That's right. Yeah,
with a specialism in adult mental health. I better let you say something about yourself before I give you nothing else to say.
Well, yeah, being part of Hope Street Church for the last couple of years has been great for us. As a family, it's been a massive change moving up to Wrexham, but we love it here and we love the church, love everything that's happening. But yeah, my day job is a clinical psychologist, so I work for the NHS and I care very much about that work. But I suppose that's the thing that maybe connects the work that we do, Andy, is that we sort of care about people and do that in different ways. But yeah, so that's my job, and then I've got my wife and 2 children and a third one that's about to be born at any moment now.
Like this week, is that right?
Hopefully not in the next 30-40 minutes. But.
Yeah. But the bag is packed next to the door, right?
Yeah, well, bag is packed next to the kitchen. That's where we'll be doing it. I think that's fair. Home birth, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Brilliant. Well,
so I'm really glad to be here, and I feel that talking about mental health, but depression that we're going to be talking about is a massive subject. It's something that a lot of people are kind of a little more aware of and thinking about these days. But I think as Christians as well, it feels to me like a powerful spiritual issue as well. So I think it felt like a great idea for us to chat, to get with what we each do. So.
Absolutely. And I mean, and this conversation kind of came out of a chat that we were having a few weeks ago, weren't we?
Yeah.
And probably, I mean, just being really honest, I think this last season, I've just had a little bit of kind of low mood. Maybe I'd describe it as a bit of depression at points. And it's probably been triggered by something which maybe we can talk about in a bit. But I guess my journey with my own mental health and wellness, I think I had what I probably describe as kind of mild depressive episode in when I was 21, and I'd lost my dad to cancer the year before, and I was finishing university and trying to write a dissertation, so long periods with no structure, just in my room, and I just remember my mood just sinking and feeling increasing just this fog and just the sense of like, oh, it's really difficult to get up, wanting to go back to bed, feeling I wanted to isolate, didn't really want to be around people, and then just through talking to a few people, through going to see a GP, through talking to actually one of the leaders at the church, actually I just found these ways of beginning to help myself recover, and I guess throughout the time since then of adult life, I wouldn't say I've had another kind of major episode, because that probably lasted a few weeks, but it's been a constant thing that I've had to be aware of and manage, and I'm just aware at certain times of the year or certain times of the day sometimes that I can find my mood slipping, and sometimes it's a bit of a kind of a fog and
Yeah, absolutely.
coming in. And as I was saying, yeah, I mean, I've had a bit of that recently, and we've just had some brilliant people come and visit the church this last weekend talking about relationships. Some of my favourite people, Nikki and Silla Lee, and they were brilliant yesterday. And they were talking about his 4 principles of healthy relationships: be proactive rather than reactive in giving kindness and love, like be positive. In the gift of encouragement in a relationship, being I've forgotten what the third one was, patient, and being peaceful. And I guess I might even add a 5th one in there of healthy relationships, which is being present. But I would say, even knowing all of that, there's just sometimes those moments where actually you just find yourself, the temptation being to kind of press the escape button. And when we were talking the other day, it's like you put the nail on. I felt like you put the nail on the head in just describing what I think I hear as I talk to different people, and mostly guys, to be fair, and about just some of this stuff. And you can kind of, we were talking about how it just seems like in our community recently, actually talking to a lot of people who've been experiencing a bit of this. But do you want to say that you said to me a couple of
weeks ago? I think so I suppose just going back to how you've started this with your own story, I guess the reality is that, you know, I'm a clinical psychologist, but I'm a person as well, and I've been through my fair share of difficulty. And I mean, one example is quite a few years ago, shortly after getting married, there was a period where, I mean, there was just a lot going on. I won't go into the details, but I wasn't treating my marriage very well. And so what that ended up looking like is that I was coming home from work, and it was, do you know, I didn't even realise I was doing it, but I'd sit down on the sofa, and then later my wife would come in, Lydia, she'd come in behind me, and I wouldn't even turn around. It was like I was just completely somewhere else, and I would describe it as numb. I felt numb, but I didn't feel, I wasn't very present. That's, you know, the least of it, I guess, is that I wasn't very present. And if that's just a moment in a day, that moment is a version of so many other moments in the relationship when I was feeling that way. So I think I've got like an analogy of depression that I think is helpful, because it kind of helps to describe some of these things that happens. But so I think when you think about the word, because the trouble is with depression is that there's lots of ideas out there about it, and I think some people think that it's something that only some people get, or that it's like an illness, like a disease that you have to medicate. And I don't believe that stuff. That's not how I relate to it. I don't think it's a very helpful way of relating to it. I think we all suffer at various times, and our experiences often contribute to those difficulties. But ultimately we all go through it. But the word depression, when you think about the word, it makes me think about like I've got a front with this because I'm not a car person. I don't know. I'm no mechanic, but I think this is how an engine works, right? So you have a cylinder.
He'll pick you up on it.
Yeah. If anyone's got a correction for me, let me know. But in a car, there's a number of cylinders. And in that cylinder, there's a piston, and the piston moves down through and compresses or depresses. Depresses the contents.
Yeah.
And what happens is it makes the contents volatile, then, doesn't it? So that compressed material becomes volatile, and then all it needs is a spark for an explosion. That's where the power comes from, right?
Yeah.
But the thing that's interesting about that is that once depressed, what's left behind it is a vacuum, or nothing, is nothingness. And I've heard a lot of people in my work tell me it's not that, you know, I think I'm depressed, but it's not that I feel sad, it's that I feel nothing at all. And sadness is obviously a part of it, but I think that numbness is something that people that have experienced depression can relate to, and can understand. But also the volatility of the stuff that gets squashed down. So I'll map it out a bit more for you. I'll put it into context so that it's less abstract. But so I guess I mean, just the experience of a lay man, just that lay man goes out into the world and will have ideas about how their life should be, and those ideas come from the things that are being said to them by the people around them, so their family, their parents, and so, but they'll come from the world as well. So you might imagine that lay man is struggling at work, and they're not, for whatever reason, they don't feel that they're doing a good job. Maybe they're literally being told they're not. And so they're carrying this sense of being a failure. But in this layman's experience, being a failure is unacceptable. And being a failure is something that wasn't tolerated in their life. So what does it mean for me now? I'm the man that I believe I shouldn't be, and I'm failing, and somehow I've got to carry that with me. So it makes sense. It makes sense that the mind would push that down, because it's hard. It's hard to live with that, and it's hard to exist feeling like you're failing or like you're not living up to something that you should live up to. So the mind does something amazing, really. It squashes that stuff down, and it's trying to protect us, right? That's kind of I'm sure people have heard defense mechanisms. Defenses are there to protect you. And the trouble is that it becomes volatile. So then let's say that layman is confronted with something that just hurts a bit. So let's say they're wanting to squash all that stuff down, they're numbing themselves. So when they're at home, they're not engaging with their life because it's too difficult. So they're looking through their phone, or they're locking themselves away, stuck in fantasy land or stuck in pornography, or they're stuck in a bottle, and that's the way that they're maintaining this state. But then, I don't know, let's say that something, the spark comes in and someone says, what, you're not being here for me, you know, you're supposed to be here, you've got responsibilities, you're supposed to be here for me, I'm right here in front of you and you can't see me. And then that man is not only, that depression starts to, and it's volatile, so then you get an explosion. The explosion can turn inwards, so people can end up hating themselves or hurting themselves sometimes, and I'll talk a bit about that in a second. But they can end up hurting themselves, or they can become volatile. They can get angry, they can tell the other person that they're wrong because they can't bear to hear it, or so that's kind of, that's why I think, but the analogy is helpful as well, because it helps you to know something about what can come next then. So perhaps we can get to that, but I'm wondering what you're thinking about.
No, I mean, just some thoughts stuff that people have written up as well, like somebody describing it being like covered in a shroud of death, permeates your entire being to the very depth. She's such a powerful description. And I mean, if you're watching this and you're going through that, like, just my heart goes out to you. Let's talk about, I mean, in one way, like, I love to talk about the power of forgiveness at some point, but also just the I guess just also the other side of it, which is in some ways it's the shame and what what shame does in the midst of it. Because I guess the lie that comes in quite quickly to us when we're feeling like some of those things that maybe you've talked about, like taking the guy, for instance, who, you know, might feel like a failure. And I know from in my life, you know, a couple of moments where I feel like I've had sort of moments where career things haven't gone as well, or moments of personal failure, and there comes it can quickly, if you don't talk about it with other people or just push those feelings down, it becomes a bigger and bigger thing of I don't feel like I don't really want to share this with somebody. And then you start thinking, if I did, like, would somebody, would I be rejected? Would I be judged or rejected? And that's a really powerful That's a really powerful emotion, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Unpack,
Yeah, yeah.
unpack that a little bit, and it's kind of the power
Well,
of, in some ways as well. Sorry, I'll let
no,
you.
yeah, go
But
on,
it's
go
that
on.
thing of the way that we see the world. I mean, am I right in thinking that you know, psychologists would tell us that that we edit out so much of what happens in the world, because there's so much stimulus coming at us the whole time, and there's a
Yeah,
sense
yeah.
actually that it means that we end up seeing often the thing that we're programming ourselves to see. So
Yes.
you know, which can play into the narrative that perhaps we've got going on into our head. So it's like if we've experienced failure in the past, then it might be that actually I see that this is happening again, when actually that's not necessarily where this road is leading, but we're telling ourselves that. And or you know, we in Christian circles, you know, we believe that we're spiritual beings. We believe that there's an enemy called the father of lies, and that often that's the key way that the enemy will work is in that realm of just the lies that will play around in our mind about who we are, and it plays into that thing of shame, doesn't it?
Well, yeah. So yeah, do you know, there's a bit in the Bible that I think speaks to this really nicely, and it's right at the beginning, so I feel like it's a good place for it, because it helps you to know something about like God's heart for this. Because so in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve they're in perfect relationship with God. Like it's something like pure and unadulterated and perfect. And then the serpent comes in, the devil, the enemy, comes in and sort of corrupts that in the way that, so we know the story about the apple. But then they suddenly start to feel ashamed of themselves, and so they cover themselves up, cover their bodies. And I love what God says to them is, who told you that you were naked?
Yeah.
And it's just, the reason I love it, it sounds, because up until that point, being naked hadn't meant anything.
And what's wrong?
What's wrong with being naked?
Yeah.
You know, like, what's wrong with their body? What's wrong with, and it's like, and there's so many examples of this where I think, gosh, this is what we're living with these days. You know, the types of, so on social media, I guess the thing that women are having to deal with, and men actually, but perhaps a little more so for women, is about how they relate to their bodies, and the types of messages that exist in social media about what a good body is. And I think God would say, who told you that? Who told you that your body was the way it was, like that? How have you arrived at that idea about yourself? Well, who told you that you were a failure just because you're struggling this week?
Yeah.
You know, who's led you to believe that struggling is equatable to failure? But yeah, so I've got to say, I've got a wife that keeps me accountable. She talks to me and shows me things that I don't always see. But there's one example that I wanted to give about the way that shame plays out, and so, you know, I had a complicated relationship with my father, and I guess what I didn't realise is that I'd carried some ideas with me about what I didn't want to be, and I guess I'd had a very personal and lived experience of someone that didn't know how to be there, and so now I've got children, and I've got to tell you, that's like a triggering area for me. So and we'll all have our own that's relative to our own stories, but I'm just giving the example. But so there are days when I'm tired and I don't have patience, or I don't have the space to attend to them, and then they might act up and they might struggle or whatever, and you know, they're very young, and so they'll do that. But I'll come away and I'll find myself drifting away, and then Lydia will say to me, where have you gone? And I realise, it's, you know, there's something that happened earlier in that interaction with the children. I think I was probably reminded, or I felt as if I was something that I just was so desperate not to be. And my mind just switched off, depressed. Do you see that content gets depressed? So this isn't like people do get episodes of depression, but it's like self states are always moving. We're experiencing ourselves in different ways in every moment, I guess. So with my story, shame is a big part of that. You know, something understandably that's quite difficult about that for me. And any time I get a sniff that I might be a bit like that, or might be a little bit sort of disappointing in a moment or something like that, it's tricky, you know, and I have to then respond to that by talking or by noticing that it's happening.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, that's all the dark side of it all, isn't it? I mean, and I think we probably mapped it out well in that degree. I'm sure there's lots of other things we could say on but like let's give some hope. Like, if you don't mind, like going back to what you were just saying, that the talking about when you're with your kids and suddenly find yourself drifting away, and then Lydia keeping you accountable on that. What's the power of saying to Lydia in that moment, this is what was going on?
Well, I guess it gives me a way of relating to myself and to what's happening for me. So putting it into words is a way of processing, I suppose. So that's one thing that it does. But I think what it does is then I often feel from her an understanding or an acceptance of what it is that I was experiencing. So she, you know, I guess a response could be something like, yeah, me too. I felt that too. Or yeah, you know, we're all going to have off days. You know, sometimes might get a bit frustrated as well, but you know, relationships are like that and you work through it. But the point that I'm making is that as soon as you start to say something, then the shame gets lifted off, and we get to understand something more about, and maybe develop a bit of compassion for ourselves.
Absolutely. I mean, the Bible talks about it in terms of things that are in the dark being brought out into the light. And in some ways, when things that are held in the dark, and I think that's where shame exists, when it's brought out, it loses its power, and in a sense, the power of like what people might describe as confession, which is, you know, saying to another human being something that we're feeling that we've done wrong, or you know, that we've done that isn't God's best for us. The power of that, you know, Dietrich Bonhoeffer in his book, he talks about it feeling like death, telling a friend, confiding in a friend, this is what I've just done. I'm not pleased with it, or it might even, I mean, I guess you know, you were talking about something, nothing you've done wrong, but the sense of something that you're feeling ashamed about, and actually the power of, as soon as it's brought into the light, it loses its power. And I guess as Christians, you know, the real power is knowing that actually we're forgiven. And that there's nothing that we've done, or that we feel that we've done, that that means that God doesn't love us and accept us. And our gift to one another, I guess, is part of reflecting that unconditional love. Yeah.
And I think that is a real powerful stance against some of the things that are actually contributing to depression, I guess. So I was thinking about it before we got chatting, and I guess some of the things that people might have experienced that then take them to this very difficult place. I guess some things like, I mean, trauma. So trauma, abuse, neglect, those kinds of very difficult experiences, stressful life experience. So losing a loved one, losing a parent, or going through transition. So moving house, changing job, and those kinds of things. But I think social can do, I already touched a bit on it, you know, what social media can do. I guess I imagine that everyone has some sense of what social media can do, but I think actually just society broadly at the moment is just really tough, really tough. You know, it's hard not to feel like things are just getting on top of you, and the cost of living crisis, but even just some of the ideas like that I would associate with capitalism. So the idea that we as individuals have to gain as much capital as possible, and that capital is what defines your worth or your value. The trouble is that that system really just doesn't work for that many people. And so what the inevitable outcome then is that you get a huge amounts of the population that just feel like they're on a hamster wheel. But yeah, so then what we get as a Christian, what is being offered is the antithesis of all that. It's the absolute perfect example of not that. But I think we'll probably come on to it in just a minute, Andy, because there are some sort of, you know, Christian or not Christian, there's some things that we can do and ways that we can engage with ourselves that could be helpful. So unless there's, we could perhaps think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things I just thought about as you were talking about that is, sorry, T, go for it. My daughter just came in, which is absolutely fine. Is the power of Sabbath. You know that we apologize. A classic. The power of Sabbath. You know, in the Old Testament, the Jewish people were enslaved in Egypt, and when they came out, it was like one of the first things that God said to them was, remember the Sabbath. And it's this sense of like, we're on, as you talked about, this hamster wheel, the sense of pressure that there's never enough, nothing's enough, you know, and that actually the gift of for a period of time in the week saying, enough, I am enough, I have enough, I've done enough, you know, there's nothing more that I need to do in this moment, and receiving the gift of grace, that actually it is a step of faith in these moments, and it's a step of trust, because you always know, there's these things on my to-do list that I've not done this week yet. But actually that sometimes we just need to receive for ourselves that we can't always be on the whole time, 24 hours a day. Like sometimes we have to be able to just be and receive, and that is a huge gift on the level of identity and this whole thing of success and failure, because actually we know that ultimately it's not through just working ourselves into the ground that we're going to get where God is calling us to, because you know there's nothing that we can do that's going to make God love us more. There's nothing that we can do that's going to make God love us less. Like, we work out of His grace, and that is the incredible gift, particularly for those for whom probably have some woundedness and brokenness in that area.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I saw a comment, I think someone called Danielle commented a minute ago saying about deep rest, which is, I guess, you know, when depressed, you need deep rest. And I think I heard, I think Jim Carrey once quoted something about that. Jim Carrey, obviously a wonderful comedian, but someone who has publicly talked about his difficulties and struggles with depression. But deep rest, I feel like that's an important sort of place to begin, is to think that when things are going hard, that we need to try to have a go at stepping back and looking after ourselves. But I had some. Sorry, you were gonna.
No, well, I was just going to say, yeah. So, I mean, we've talked about, I guess, the ways in which we can negatively handle those moments of where we're feeling those uncomfortable feelings and trying to numb things. What are some of the ways in which actually maybe just some practices that we can try and put in place to to manage those feelings and to direct ourselves more into, I guess, rest and healing.
Yeah. So I think, so yeah, there's, I mean, I've got to be frank. Depression is kind of a part of being human.
Yeah.
Sometimes things are hard, and I think that there is value in allowing yourself to go through something that's hard. But yeah, I guess the question that you're asking is how not to move into that place where you're numb to it, and because when we're numb to it, then there's no processing that's happening.
Yeah.
So I think something that can help, that's a challenge, but you don't have to do it a lot, but that you can do it a bit, is journaling. So journaling is something that is practiced in all sorts of domains, Christianity being one of them. I guess that it's a useful Christian practice to journal when trying to think about your spiritual life. But as a mental health sort of process as well, it can be really useful. The reason that it can be useful is because all you have to do, studies have looked at this, and you do it like twice a week for no more than 15 minutes. That's all you need. And what that does is it fosters like a more positive sort of sensitive relationship to yourself. And so, and it helps, it can aid the processing of stressful or traumatic experiences. And it can also help us to begin to accept rather than to judge the things that we're going through. So it's like I don't love answers to this question that are just about doing something on your own, because I don't think that we should exist in that way. So I need to make that really clear. This is part of a wider picture, but I think that journaling can be useful if you struggle to understand what's happening for you. It can just be a way of getting your words on a page, and you'll see things. That's the idea.
That's so.
And another thing is that is really powerful, actually, especially in the work that I do. It's very, very powerful. Is trying to get in touch with your values. So I guess the thing that we're vulnerable to, particularly in, I've just seen someone's written, I found writing in various forms very useful. Yeah. Thank you, Kev.
I mean, I have as well. Just to say, I found and particularly in younger years, and the phrase I use is like, it helps my heart catch up with my head.
Yeah.
Sense of like, actually, I've experienced my head has experienced all this stuff this week, but actually my heart is lagging way behind. And I know that's physiologically probably complete rubbish, but there's that sense of just my feelings and how I've processed stuff. For some reason, writing it down on the page is helpful. And I guess in terms of Christian practices and spiritual disciplines, the examine is one way that people do that. So every night, and Pete has got his kind of way that, and I do this, try and do this every so often. It is at the end of the day, the four things is like review. So just going through what's happened today, rejoice. Like, what can I be thankful for? Just the power of gratitude in terms of reminding myself and speaking against the negative narrative that I might have in my mind. This is what I can rejoice at. So review, rejoice, repent. So knowing that actually the things that haven't gone well today, I can give to God, and I can start a new page afresh and then reboot, which is essentially the thing of what have I got? What am I gonna looking forward to tomorrow? Like, let's start again. Let's go again.
Yeah.
And the incredible gift of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And then so I mean, moving from that, because it can come from that sort of a practice as well as connecting with your values. So to get started on this, because it can be hard to know, well, what are my values? How do I know what they are, or whether I do them or not? You can Google, a list of values for like psychological values or mental health values, something like that. There's loads of materials online, and it will give you ideas, and then you can kind of go through and think, well, those feel important to me. The reason that can be a useful thing to do is because then you can start to look at, it gives you a point of reference to begin to relate to yourself, and that's ultimately what this is all about, is recognizing that something's not quite right at the moment for me, so maybe I need to try relating to myself in a new way. And so, for example, when I qualified as a clinical psychologist, I started working in the NHS, or I'd been in the NHS for a while, but I was working in a qualified role, and the NHS is a tough place to be at the minute. It's very, very sad how things are in the NHS. But I can remember feeling like there was something not right. I wasn't feeling like I was completely satisfied with what I with something, and I was helpfully pointed in the direction of thinking about my values and what it was that might have been amiss for me. And so there were, I guess, in the job, like I came to understand what was going on in my day to day, but the thing, there was something about community, something about me connecting with others in a way that feels good or useful or connected. And so at that point, that was sort of when I started to make a shift, and actually Bridge the Gap is Bridge the Gap, for those that don't know, is a football ministry connected to the church that I'm involved with a couple of friends. And so it's this football community that's not just about playing football, it's about just being in community and relationship with people. Yeah. And I can remember that when I started to think, well, that is a source of nourishment for me, and it felt consistent with my values and how I wanted to be. And I can remember it starting to feel like I was getting charged up by it, and it meant as much to me as I hope it means to some of the others that are there. That's just one example.
But just at that for a minute, Carl, because actually the value of community in that place, like quite a really diverse bunch of guys, right? But you were saying to me earlier, like the kind of how critical the whole area of mental health is, particularly amongst men and young men. Like it's number one, like suicide's number one cause of
of death in men under the age of 50. Suicide is the number one cause. So number one cause of death is, it's awful. It's really, really sad. So
and with stats like that, there'll be probably lots of people on this Instagram chat that that knows somebody that's taken their own life, and it's just absolutely tragic.
It is, it is tragic. And I think that community movements, so whether that's church is a really great place for community, but finding community in places that feel meaningful to you. So a friend down south in Kent, I really admired her ability and will to go into places where she could explore her interests. And I remember for a while she was in a jive class, and it's just those sorts of things. And then anyway, that's just one example. There's millions, aren't there? But it's that sort of finding place where you can be. Find connection with people, and hopefully find connection with people who can be with you when you're struggling.
Well, that's really good, really good. And Carl, I mean, if people are really really feel that they're struggling with this and they're kind of sinking, what are some of the ways that they can find help?
Well, I'll answer that question. I suppose what I want to say before that is that there'll be going to be people listening that are also wanting to be helpful, and being helpful is something that is anyone can be helpful. It can be a skill to learn, you know, it can be difficult sometimes to listen to someone's distress and and not to move into a place of trying to tell them how to manage it, or trying to like worry about what it is that they need to do or not do in response.
Yeah.
But so pressing into, well, practicing listening and being able to just be with someone. And the thing that can help us to do that is by recognizing that we are no different to the person that sat in front of us. So they're going through a hard time right now. They're going through whatever it is that they're going through. And the thing that can help us to connect to that person is to remember that we've had a hard time as well, and that we will have a hard time in the future. And so that we can all connect on that level. And so then we kind of get a bit of a better sense. We can drop our shoulders a bit and start to think, well, do you know what? I'm just here and I've got some ears to listen to you, and I've got some time that I can spend with you as well. So that's something that I hope that people will hear. But so if you're in that place, if that's where anybody is that's listening to this is, if they're feeling really desperate, I suppose I need to address this at different levels, because there will be some people, I imagine, that have felt suicidal before, or who have felt like they wanted to hurt themselves, and like that was the way of making sense of their distress. If that's you, then I want to urge you to speak to your GP, because there are systems around, and those systems are in place to support people that are in crisis. If that feels a bit too difficult, then I guess I'd encourage you to think about the next person that you know who can take you there, who can take you and sit with you in A&E if you're feeling like you're stuck and like you don't know how to get through the night, or find the next person that can do that bit for you. But I suppose then thinking a little more about the everyday, the everyday struggles that we go through, and like, I'm having a really terrible time in my relationship, I'm having a terrible time at work, I just don't know who I am anymore, I've kind of lost sense of who I am or where I'm supposed to be. Then, I mean, I'm saying what I've already said and what you've already said, Andy, but it's try to put yourself into places that wants to hear you. And those places exist. I think that we have a responsibility as a church to make ourselves known that that's what we are, and that that's who we want to be for people.
Yeah.
And of course, there's plenty of imperfection in that, but it's the intention and the will and the striving to be a community that can be available just as much as it can be in need.
Yeah, and we will do that very imperfectly, but you know. Like, we really want to be able to be that place. And I mean, if you're around in town on a Monday, we do the warm space, and anybody can come in and just have a coffee. But also just, you know, the guys that work in Tabernacle, if you want to just come in and grab a coffee and be around people, you know, they're not necessarily going to have the time for you to tell them your life story, but just in terms of being around others, you know, we'd love to. You know, do pop in if you're in Wrexham and that, but because I know how costly it can be when you're feeling like actually, for some people to come on a Sunday, and be around people is such a big step for them when they're not feeling in a great place. And just say, you know, huge respect to you to come and be willing to be there, but not be in a great place. You know, and absolutely, and we want to be that place of where you can come and receive unconditional love, because that is what Jesus modeled. You know, and you know, and we believe, you know, that he has the power to the power of forgiveness through Jesus is huge, and the picture of salvation that he offers is this one of, you know, the understanding in the Jewish context, Psalm 18, it's like he reached down from on high and pulled me out of the depths, out of the deepest water. And some people might be feeling like that's where they are, and put and took me out into a wide open space. And you know, that's the understanding of salvation. That's in that Jesus brings. So here we are in Holy Week, where we remember Jesus' death on the cross, and he suffered for us, and we know that doesn't mean that this side of heaven, it doesn't mean that we're perfect people or joyful, but we are a community that wants to be there for people.
Absolutely, yeah.
Alongside. Oh, Kyle, we have gone over time, and I think my phone is about to run out of power. before rather embarrassingly cut off. I wonder whether we might just say a quick prayer just to finish.
Yeah.
And Heavenly Father, I thank you for everybody that's been on this call, and I just pray right now that whatever anyone is going through that is watching this at the moment, that Holy Spirit, that you would just meet with them now, place peace in their hearts, and know, Lord, and that they might know that you love them, because you love them, because you love them.
Yeah, I pray into that as well, Lord. I pray that I hope that something that's been said today, that it might touch for all of us, I guess, for all of us, that something that has been said will resonate and help open a new door. And I pray, Lord, that you'll support everybody to walk on through the door, to try to experience something new. In relation to themselves, in relation to others, and that you will nourish that journey.
Yes. Amen.
Amen.
Kyle, it's been fun.
Yeah, it has. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Yeah. I'll see you very soon.
I hope it's been beneficial to others. But we will.
I hope so too.
Yes. Thank you so much for listening. Those that have tuned in. And have a good week, and we are here if you want to chat. Lots of love.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to the Hope Street podcast. We're a church in Wrexham with a vision to be a people of hope, following Jesus and giving ourselves away to see Wrexham renewed. To find out more, head to our website hopestreet.church or follow us on social media.